There exists a deeply ingrained popular prejudice that Wall Street is nothing more than a den of gamblers, a grand casino where fortunes are made and lost on the turn of a card. The clergy, in their righteous but misguided zeal, have often painted it as the sum of all infamies, a place to be shunned by honest men. But this dense ignorance, this clerical obliquity of judgment, stems from a profound misunderstanding of its true nature. Success in this great financial mart is not a matter of blind luck. It is the result of a specific studied strategy, a particular mental discipline exemplified not by the frenzied crowd, but by a distinct class of men I have observed for 50 years, the old veterans of the street. Why is it that some men consistently build fortunes through the storms of financial panics, while others, following the hot tips and slippery rumors of the day, are inevitably ruined? The answer lies not in secret knowledge, but in a timeless method grounded in the very bedrock of value and human psychology. Few gain sufficient experience in Wall Street to command success until they reach that period of life in which they have one foot in the grave. These old veterans, these seasoned campaigners, are a peculiar breed. They spend long intervals in repose, seemingly disconnected from the daily turmoil of the market, allowing their bank balances to accumulate. But in times of panic, when the financial gales sweep through the street, when squalls rage and the nerve of ordinary men fails, these old fellows are suddenly seen hobbling down on their canes to their brokers' offices. They do not come to sell. They do not come to join the chorus of fear. They come to buy. With the cash they have patiently accumulated for just such an emergency, they purchase good stocks, stocks of intrinsic value that the panicked herd is sacrificing for a pittance. The panic rages until enough of these cash purchases are made to absorb the liquidation and form a new foundation for prices. And when the squall has spent its force, as it inevitably must, these old fellows who have been resting judiciously on their oars quickly realize their profits, deposit them with their bankers, and retire once more to the quietude of their homes, awaiting the next inevitable storm. This is not market timing as the modern chart reader understands it. It is not an attempt to predict the day or the hour. It is a profound understanding that periods of intense, irrational fear are the greatest opportunities for the discerning investor. It is the art of being courageous when others are fearful and cautious when others are greedy. This cycle is as old as the markets themselves. What my generation knew as a squall or a panic, like the Western blizzard of 1857 that began with the failure of the Ohio Life and Trust Company and paralyzed the nation, your generation knows by other names. It was the dot-com bust when technology stocks built on hope rather than earnings evaporated into thin air. It was the financial crisis of 2008, when the very foundations of the banking system seemed to be crumbling. In each instance, the mechanism was the same: a period of undue expansion and reckless speculation, followed by a sudden contraction of credit and a crisis of confidence. Prices fell 50% in a few days. Millionaires were reduced to indigence in a few hours. And in the midst of that chaos, the modern-day old veteran, the true value investor, was quietly buying. He was purchasing the shares of fundamentally sound enterprises from those who were forced to sell, those who had overextended their credit, and those who simply lost their nerve. He acts on the timeless principle that the time to buy is when blood is running in the streets. The greatest enemy of the aspiring speculator, the surest path to ruin, is the slavish habit of following points and rumors that are supposed to emanate from the big operators. This practice nearly always ends in loss and sometimes in disaster. The young speculator becomes a mere parasite, his mind entirely subjected to others who are presumed to do the thinking for him. He fails to cultivate the self-reliance that is indispensable to success in any kind of business. These professional pointers, these specious frauds who haunt the hotels and whisper of new pools and secret councils, are the jackals of the financial world, preying on the ignorant and the greedy. To the question so often put, "How can I make money in Wall Street?" There is no better answer than the one given by old Meyer Rothschild. I buys sheep and sells deer. In modern parlance, buy cheap and sell dear. Those who follow this method always succeed. In almost every year, there are 2 or 3 squalls in the street when it is possible to purchase stocks below their intrinsic value. The squall usually passes in a few days, and then the lucky buyers reap their profits. The secret is not in the tip, but in the timing born of patient observation and independent judgment. It is in watching for the ominous visits of these old men, for they are as certain to be seen on the eve of a panic as spiders creeping stealthily from their cobwebs just before rain. These timeless strategies, these first-hand accounts of the men who shaped American finance, are not mere memories lost to time. They are meticulously documented principles, a masterclass in financial strategy and human psychology. For those who wish to truly understand the methods of the old veterans, there is no greater resource than the complete, unabridged new edition of 50 Years in Wall Street. This is not simply a book of history. It is a 2-volume, 1,000-page mentorship with Henry Clews himself. Within these pages, you will walk side by side with him as he navigates the treacherous currents of the Civil War loans, weathers the panics that wiped out fortunes, and dissects the methods of titans like Vanderbilt, Drew, and Gould. You will learn to recognize the squalls before they have passed, to cultivate the self-reliance necessary for success, and to understand the true nature of speculation not as a gamble, but as a great productive force in our economy. This new edition, complete with all the original photographs, offers you the chance to gain the experience of a 50-year veteran without paying the market's usual tuition fee of devastating losses. It is an indispensable guide for any man who seeks to command his own financial destiny. The link to acquire this invaluable mentor in print is in the description below this video. The principle articulated by Rothschild, buy cheap, sell dear, is the very essence of sound investment, yet its profound simplicity is lost on the majority of market participants. They chase prices, buying high in a state of euphoria and selling low in a fit of terror. The old veteran does the opposite. But how does one determine what is cheap and what is dear? It has little to do with the stock's recent price movement and everything to do with its intrinsic value. A stock selling at $50 may be extraordinarily expensive, while another at $500 may be a bargain. The price is what you pay, the value is what you get. The veteran speculator makes it his business to understand the true worth of a property. He studies its earnings, its assets, its management, and its future prospects. He calculates what it would be worth in the hands of a prudent private owner. He then waits with the patience of a hunter for the market in one of its periodic fits of madness to offer him that property at a substantial discount to its real value. When panic strikes, the amateur sees only peril. The veteran sees only opportunity. He is buying not a fluctuating quotation on a ticker tape, but a fractional ownership in a tangible, productive enterprise. And when the madness subsides and the market once again recognizes the true value of that enterprise, he sells to the very crowd that once sold to him in a panic, and he sells it dear. This is the foundation upon which all great Wall Street fortunes have been built, not on tips, not on charts, not on gambles, but on the disciplined purchase of value when it is offered for sale at the price of fear. It is a common delusion, particularly among those outside of Wall Street, that speculation is a game any man with money can play. This notion, as pernicious as it is widespread, has been the wreck of more fortunes and reputations than any other single error in judgment. Speculation is not a pastime, it is a business that must be studied as a specialty. It demands a particular kind of training, a severe mental discipline, and a character forged in the fires of experience. The man who believes he can act as his own lawyer is said to have a fool for a client. The man who enters Wall Street believing his success in other fields guarantees him success. Here is doubly a fool, for he risks not only his capital but his good name on an enterprise for which he is utterly unprepared. The path to fortune in finance is not paved with college diplomas or inherited wealth, but with the hard-won lessons of practical business, undertaken from the earliest possible age. I have usually found that the sons of independent gentlemen, who have great expectations, make very poor clerks and do not develop into good Wall Street men. Their expectations seem to dwarf the ability that might develop under the more favorable auspices of being obliged to paddle their own canoe. Like the light under a bushel, their brilliant qualities are obscured and circumscribed by the paternal protection in prospect. They have not a sufficient incentive to work, because they know that all they require for their natural wants will fall easily into their laps. The motives, therefore, which usually develop the greatest mental qualities are absent, and the qualities themselves lie dormant, frequently decaying without being productive of the fruits which are the result of industrial habits and the desire for acquisition. This is not a slight upon their character, but a simple observation of human nature. The necessity of struggle is the great sharpener of wits, the great builder of fortitude. The young man who has nothing but his own resources to depend upon will be found far more meritorious. He learns early the value of $1 because he has known the effort required to earn it. He cultivates the self-reliance that is indispensable to success because he has no one else to rely upon. The strongest characters have been worked out in brave and patient competition and conflict, often under difficult circumstances, whereas the men who have never been thrown upon their own resources rarely amount to anything. In our modern world, this principle extends beyond the sons of gentlemen. It applies to any man who enters the market without a profound respect for the capital he is risking. The man who comes into a fortune overnight, whether through inheritance or a lucky turn in some other business, and believes he can conquer Wall Street with the same ease, is destined for a rude awakening. He lacks the crucial training that comes from starting at the bottom, from understanding the mechanics of business from the ground up. He is prone to youthful and enervating excesses, having the means to indulge in amusements that are not conducive to clear brains or active habits during the day. These recreations do not fit a young man for business downtown. Success in speculation requires a man to be in the best possible physical and mental condition, with a mind untroubled by the fog of late nights and easy living. The best school and college in which a man can graduate for a business career is practical business itself. Beyond training and temperament, there is a foundational quality upon which the entire edifice of Wall Street rests, a quality more valuable than any amount of capital or any degree of cunning. It is personal honor. There is no place in the world where people are trusted so much on faith as they are in Wall Street, not even in the church. The business is one of mutual confidence. Millions of dollars in transactions are made every hour on the floor of the exchange with no more than a nod of the head or a word spoken in the roar of the crowd. A broker's word is his bond, and a contract thus made is never repudiated, no matter how heavy a loss it may involve. The penalty for such a repudiation would be immediate suspension, followed by expulsion. The very magnitude to which the business of Wall Street has grown is a living proof of its moral stamina. It is impossible, in the social and moral nature of things, to unite a large number of men, representing important material interests, except on principles of equity and fair dealing. A conspiracy to cheat must always be confined to a small number. The men of Wall Street have therefore become world-renowned for straightforward dealing. This is not a matter of sentiment. It is a matter of absolute necessity. Without this implicit trust, this bedrock of integrity, the entire machinery of finance would grind to a halt. In a world that grows increasingly cynical, let this be understood. The man whose honor is questionable, whose word cannot be relied upon with the certainty of the rising sun, has no permanent place in Wall Street. He may flourish for a time, but he will topple down eventually. The man who is destined for success learns to cultivate his own judgment. He avoids the ruinous dependency on the advice of others. One day, a man gave me an order to buy 1,000 shares of Erie without limit. The order was executed at 94. I had no sooner bought it than the stock went down. My customer returned in a short time and ordered the stock to be sold. It was then 92.5. In half an hour afterwards, he returned again and ordered it bought back again, without any limit as before. It was bought back at 95. After consulting with other friends, he ordered it sold again. The market by that time was 90. He then came back a fifth time and said, "I first saw one man who told me to buy, and then another who told me to sell. I understand one is called a bull and the other a bear. About these names I don't know much, but I do know now that I am a jackass." This affords a good illustration of the way the average speculator is managed and perplexed. He is a ship without a rudder, tossed about by the conflicting winds of opinion. The most successful operators are those who have received severe training, who have had some sledgehammer blows applied to their heads to temper them, like the conversion of iron into steel. Through this process, they develop a peculiar and admonitory influence, a sort of inspiration that warns them in times of approaching squalls. This is not a mystical gift, but the product of a mind steeped in the realities of the market, a judgment honed by years of intense focus and costly experience. It is this quality that allows a man to take points on the market in at one ear and dispose of them through the other without suffering any evil consequences, and to look upon the kind friends who strew these valuable tips so lavishly around with the deepest commiseration. True success in speculation comes from cultivating this inner counsel, this hard-won self-reliance, until your own judgment becomes your most trusted advisor. Finally, let the man who has achieved success in one walk of life approach Wall Street with the greatest humility. The common delusion that a man who has been successful in one thing can succeed in anything and everything he attempts has been the cause of irreparable disaster and overwhelming disgrace. There is no more poignant example of this than the fate of the great captains of the Union. General Grant, the savior of our nation, a man whose military genius was without parallel, was as helpless as a babe when Ferdinand Ward and James D. Fish moved upon his works. The eye that took in the whole situation at a glance at Vicksburg, Richmond, and Appomattox was totally unable to penetrate the insidious and speculative designs of the young Napoleon of finance. General Grant was a victim, not so much to his sincere and unsuspecting nature, as to his want of early training in financial business affairs, and to the fact that he was unable to appreciate its necessity in dealing with sharp businessmen of loose morals. The same fate befell General Winslow and General Porter in the West Shore Railroad matter. These were not men of ordinary capacity. They were heroes who had planned and executed projects upon which the destiny of the nation had depended. Yet when they attempted to manage banks and financial operations, they became hopelessly entangled. The lesson is a severe but necessary one. The business of Wall Street requires long and close training in financial affairs, so that the mind may attain a flexible facility with the various ins and outs of speculative methods. It is a profession unto itself, with its own rules, its own dangers, and its own unique requirements for success. The man who enters it must do so not as a conqueror from another field, but as an apprentice, ready to learn, willing to be tested, and prepared to pay the price in discipline and study that this great and unforgiving arena demands of all who would seek to master it. To truly master the art of making money in Wall Street, one must first understand the anatomy of its greatest perils and its most profound opportunities, the financial panics. These crises are commonly spoken of as accidental freaks of the markets, born of reckless speculation. But this is the notion of a mere surface observer. In a nation like the United States, a nation of pioneers constantly subduing new territory, opening new mines, and building new railroads, these upheavals are as natural and as periodic as the seasons. They are the necessary purgations of a dynamic economy, the violent squalls that clear the air and wash away the unsound and the overinflated, leaving behind a landscape ripe with opportunity for the prepared and the courageous. Consider the great panics of our history. The Panic of 1837 had its origin in a deranged currency and excessive importations, culminating in a sudden contraction by the banks. In New York City alone, failures amounted to $100 million. 20 years later, the panic of 1857, known as the Western Blizzard, swept over the street with even greater force. It was fueled by the rapid construction of railroads on borrowed capital and unchecked bank credits. The first serious blow was the failure of the Ohio Life and Trust Company, a concern of gigantic dimensions in those days. Upon the announcement of its collapse, business became completely paralyzed. Prices fell 50% in a few days, and a large proportion of the board of brokers were obliged to go into involuntary liquidation. In each instance, the cause was the same. A period of overtrading and reckless speculation was suddenly checked by bank contractions. But in the wreckage of these storms, the seeds of future fortunes were sown. These periods of the breaking down of unsound enterprises and of the weeding out of insolvent debtors are essential to the maintenance of a sound and wholesome condition of business. They are the moments when true value is divorced from public perception, when the finest properties are thrown on the bargain counter by those who are either forced to sell or are blinded by terror. This is the moment for which the veteran operator patiently waits. Your role during a panic is not to join the stampede, but to act with the cold, calculating precision of a general on a chaotic battlefield. This requires three essential qualities, cultivated long before the first winds of the storm begin to blow. First is patience, which manifests as the accumulation of a cash reserve. This is the key. The old veterans do not rush to find money when the panic strikes. They have it waiting, accumulated for just such an emergency. They have resisted the temptation to be fully invested during the bull market's euphoric peak. They have held back a portion of their capital, letting it lie dormant, earning little, while others mock their conservatism. But this cash is their ammunition. Without it, even the keenest judgment is useless. When the crisis arrives and credit vanishes, cash is king. The ability to buy when no one else can is the ultimate strategic advantage. Do not use all your available resources in your original margin. Keep a reserve. This discipline of holding back funds is the price of admission to the greatest opportunities the market will ever offer. Second is courage. You must act when every fiber of your being and every voice around you is screaming in terror. You must be a buyer when the air is thick with rumors of ruin, when banks are suspending and great firms are failing. It is precisely at this moment, when it is possible to purchase stocks below their intrinsic value, that the lucky buyers come in for their profits. This is not the courage of a gambler betting on a random chance. It is the courage born of conviction, the courage of a man who has done his homework and knows the real worth of the property he is acquiring. It is the courage to stand apart from the herd, to be sober when the world is drunk with fear. While others are indiscriminately liquidating, without regard to consequences, you must step into the breach. This is the defining moment that separates the master speculator from the perpetually sheared lamb. Third, and most critical, is judgment. Courage without judgment is mere recklessness. The instruction of the veteran is not to buy anything that is falling, but to buy good stocks. This requires the long and close training necessary to distinguish between a fundamentally sound enterprise that is temporarily undervalued due to market hysteria and a truly rotten concern that is collapsing under the weight of its own fraud or incompetence. The panic of 1857 was followed by a work of rehabilitation and reorganization. Much of the old conservative element had fallen to rise no more, and its place was supplied by better material and young blood. Your task is to identify this better material. Is the company's business enduring? Is its management honest and capable? Are its finances sound, apart from the temporary stringency of credit? A man must study these questions, understand the properties he is buying, and have a clear conviction of their long-term value. Without this discriminating intelligence, buying in a panic is no better than catching a falling knife. There are other tempests in Wall Street besides panics, chief among them the speculative mania known as a corner. A corner is usually the result of running speculation to an excessive length, by which the seller becomes responsible for deliveries beyond what he can possibly make, placing himself at the mercy of those with whom he has made the contracts. In my time, Commodore Vanderbilt was the master of this maneuver. In the great Harlem corner, the members of the legislature, thinking to enrich themselves by selling the stock short and then defeating a bill that would benefit the road, found themselves hopelessly trapped. They had sold far more stock than was actually in existence, and the Commodore, having bought it all, forced them to settle at the ruinous price of $285 for a stock that had been below 90. He busted the whole legislature, and scores of the honorable members had to go home without paying their board bills. While such a spectacle may seem a triumph for the manipulator, it is a dangerous game, fraught with peril for all involved. A curious thing about corners is that the people who organize them generally get the most hurt in the enterprise. The bulls are often left saddled with the entire capital stock of the property, for which there is no market. In the Hannibal and St. Joseph corner, the originator, Mr. John Duff, was financially ruined. Even the great Jay Gould in the northwest corner of 1872 came near being crushed. Let the amateur speculator beware. These exigencies chiefly affect the speculators themselves, but they serve as a stark warning against the dangers of manipulative speculation as opposed to investment based on value. The veteran operator knows that such artificial movements are fleeting and treacherous. The path to substantial wealth in Wall Street is therefore not found in secret formulas, whispered tips, or cunning manipulations. It is found in the forging of a particular character. A character patient enough to wait for the great opportunities, courageous enough to act in the face of fear, and disciplined enough to base those actions upon a profound and independently acquired understanding of intrinsic value. It is a path of self-reliance, of honor, and of unceasing study. The principles are simple to state, but severe in their application. It is the capacity to adhere to these principles through the changing tides of market sentiment that distinguishes the master from the novice, the fortune builder from the fortune seeker. This is the enduring lesson from 50 years of observation in the world's greatest financial arena.